Welcome back to Inside City Hall. At the end of last week, the state legislature passed a new gun control measure in response to the Supreme Court striking down New York's concealed carry laws. The new law defines so-called sensitive locations where carrying concealed weapons will be restricted. This comes as the long weekend saw almost 40 different shootings in which 9 people died and dozens more were injured. Now, during the special session, legislators also approved a constitutional amendment that would enshrine reproductive rights, but will eventually have to go to voters for final approval. Here now to talk about that and more is State Senate Deputy Majority Leader Mike Gianaris. He represents parts of Queens that include Astoria down to Ozone Park. Thanks so much for being here. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Errol. Thanks for having me.
Senator, on the gun control measure in particular, was there any particular urgency? We knew that the law had been struck down by the Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court sent it down to a lower court for sort of further processing. Why the need to rush back to Albany and put something in place?
Well, we had rules and regulations in place as it related to concealed carry of firearms, and those were overturned. They were ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court, so we knew we needed to go back and give New Yorkers the assurance that we're going to do whatever is necessary to keep them safe in this moment. I think there's a lot of anxiety. The Supreme Court, just in the last couple of weeks, has gone haywire and is intent on destroying this country one decision at a time. It's that. It was the decision overturning Roe. It was another decision about environmental regulations. We are in real danger from what this Supreme Court is doing, and the one bastion we have to fight back is through the states. And that's why I say, thank God we were able to succeed in capturing the Senate majority 4 years ago, because it's given us the power to fight back. We would not have been able to pass the laws and the constitutional amendment we just did a few days ago had it not been for a strong Senate majority working with our colleagues in the Assembly.
The law that was passed, the speed with which you moved at it, I mean, you're an attorney, you know that, and a longtime legislator, you know that each of these new laws that you're putting in place are connected to dozens of other laws. It seemed so rushed. I've got to imagine that there are going to be consequences and fixes that are going to be needed for months, if not years, going forward.
Well, I want to take issue with a little bit of that. We knew this decision was possibly arriving months ago. And so we have been preparing in the background, waiting for this unfortunate moment to occur. So when it did, in fact, happen, we were ready at a moment's notice to spring into action. Now, look, I'm sure this is going to be challenged through litigation. Everything we do is. And with this Supreme Court, when it winds its way through the process, there's no telling where they'll land. So right now, we're in this very odd historical moment of division where states like New York, where we have the power and the ability to stand up and fight back, are going to be in this tug-of-war with the Supreme Court, it seems, on so many issues. But it's incumbent upon us to say, not here, not in our state. We're going to do what we can to keep our people safe, no matter what the Supreme Court thinks. Of course, within the legal limits that are imposed on us.
Yeah, I mean, this is an entirely different regime. I mean, New York has not traditionally done a sort of a laundry list of places where weapons are not allowed, right? So it was when I looked at the list that I realized not only will there be litigation, but New York's going to be in a pretty tough position, right? I mean, the list includes, you know, parks and playgrounds and zoos and houses of worship and places where they serve alcohol and, you know, Times Square, however that's being defined. Sooner or later, it starts to look like a big circle is being drawn around the city, which we know the Supreme Court is not going to approve, right?
Well, we'll see. The Supreme Court, in this awful decision it just gave us, specifically said that sensitive places can be protected and that licensing requirements can be stringent. So we are complying with what we believe the Supreme Court itself has indicated that the states still have the power to do, and that's what we did.
Okay, fair enough. Let me move on to the reproductive rights, the attempt to or start the process of amending the state constitution. It's an involved process. It's not supposed to be done lightly. It can't be done lightly, as a matter of fact. But I'm struck by the fact that just a few weeks prior in the regular session, the question had come up and it had not moved forward. What changed?
Well, there was some negotiation that was needed. The version that existed when the session was active was changed before we finally passed something. And I think the decision overturning Roe, which we all unfortunately knew was a strong possibility, provided the impetus to close out those negotiations once and for all. And what we did is we provided new protections in the Constitution for reproductive rights, for abortion rights, beyond even just that issue, for proactively protecting LGBTQ New Yorkers from what could be further decisions in the future that the court will issue damaging those rights. And we're enshrining them in the Constitution, which will provide protections from future whims of legislatures.
Yeah, I was going to say that is a defensive measure. It doesn't necessarily protect you from an entirely different way of thinking, either at the state level or indeed by the Supreme Court. But are you anticipating further engagement with the Supreme Court around things like same-sex marriage and other privacy rights?
Oh, well, that certainly has to be an expectation. And frankly, I'm disappointed in my own party nationally, which seems to be taking a much less aggressive posture to these fights than the Republican Party has taken over the last several decades, where many of us were sounding alarm bells as each of these Supreme Court nominees was coming down the pike. While in the interest of trying to play as fair as possible or be perceived as such, they've been run over by Republicans who have just been jamming these ideologues on the Supreme Court that are doing damage. And I would hope that what we've seen just in the last couple of weeks, and unfortunately what we can expect in the next couple of years, provide some impetus to be more aggressive as it relates to the judiciary, because they now have just become a conservative branch of government. It's not what used to be the case, where the Supreme Court was held to high esteem as the entity that provided civil rights, that guaranteed people protections against laws that would take their rights away. Now it's become the opposite.
President Biden is one of many who has said abortion rights are on the agenda, are on the ballot this fall, that this is something that voters need to take seriously and carry into the voting booth with them. You've seen, though, that there are instances where lots of issues that are extremely important to voters don't necessarily move them, at least not in the numbers that one would hope, when election time comes around. What do you think is going to happen this year?
Well, look, first of all, he's right. And as I mentioned before, thank God we won a Senate majority here in New York in 2018's elections, because we wouldn't have the power to do the things we just did last week to fight back against what the Supreme Court is doing. So elections matter. Of course they matter. That's why we're stuck with these justices at the Supreme Court level to begin with. But I will say this, the Democratic Party has to do more than just try and take advantage of the moment and get people to vote for their candidates to win elections. They have to do something with those victories. And that's where we're falling short. We have had the ability to fight back and enshrine some of these protections in law federally. It has not happened. The Republican Party shows no shame about trying to run up this war when they have control. And unfortunately, we're not fighting on equal footing here.
Okay, we'll have to leave this discussion for another time. Thanks so much for joining us, Senator Gianaris.
Thank you.
Okay.